She asked it so quietly that the air itself seemed to pause around her. Do you hate me now? The words trembled, barely formed, as if she was afraid of what they might reveal. And for a moment, he didn't answer, not because he wanted to hurt her, but because the weight of everything between them suddenly felt heavier than their own breaths. The room was dim, washed in the kind of soft evening light that makes truths impossible to hide, and when she finally lifted her eyes to his, the look there struck him deeper than any accusation ever could. His answer came low, roughened by honesty. No. I don't hate you. I just know you now. And that was what scared her. There was something charged in the space between them, an electricity born from a history neither of them fully understood yet. Her fingers brushed his arm as she stepped closer, the touch unintentional but warm enough to send a quiet shock through him. He didn't pull away. He couldn't. Not when her presence had always had a way of unraveling him, of exposing parts of himself he never meant to show. She smelled like rain on warm pavement, like something familiar that he couldn't quite resist, and when she exhaled, their breaths mingled in the narrow space that separated them. They weren't enemies. They weren't lovers. They were something dangerously in between. He remembered the way she used to laugh, open and unguarded, before everything cracked. And now here she was, standing in front of him with eyes filled with a mixture of regret and longing, as if one wrong move might shatter her completely. Whatever happened between them hadn't been simple. It hadn't been clean. There were truths she kept from him, truths that felt like small betrayals. And yet, she still made his heartbeat stumble. The moment tightened. She swallowed hard, waiting. Wanting. Afraid. He took a slow step toward her, close enough that her lashes flickered, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. For a heartbeat, either of them spoke. The possibility of something forbidden, something neither of them were sure they should want, hovered between them like a held breath. Then, just as she parted her lips to say something else, he turned his head slightly, as if he just realized the truth of what he felt. And the screen cuts right there. He didn't move at first. Just stood there, breath steady but deeper than before, like he was trying to anchor himself. She watched him, fingers curled at her sides, fighting the urge to reach out and bridge the last inches between them. The silence wasn't empty. It was thick, warm, almost humming. It wrapped around them like a secret neither of them wanted to name. Then what do you see now? She asked. Her voice was soft, but there was something braver underneath it. Something that sounded a lot like hope. He let out a slow breath. I see someone who scares me without meaning to. Her eyebrows pulled together, faint, barely there. Why? Because you feel real. He rubbed the back of his neck, a small restless gesture that betrayed more than any confession. And I'm terrible at real. That coaxed a tiny laugh from her, a shaky little sound that slipped between them like a spark. She took one careful step closer. The air changed again, tightening. He felt her warmth before she even touched him. You don't have to be terrible at this, she whispered. Not with me. His eyes lifted to hers, and in them was a storm he kept pretending didn't exist. Attraction, regret, longing, fear, tangled together in a way that made it impossible to look away. She held his gaze, steady despite the tremble in her chest. His hand twitched at his side as if it wanted to reach for her but didn't trust itself. You think it's that simple? He asked. No, she admitted. But maybe it doesn't have to be impossible. He swallowed. Hard. The moment pressed in, warm and fragile. When her fingers brushed his again, it wasn't an accident this time, it wasn't hesitant. It was a question. A quiet one. His breath hitched. She drew her hand back, just barely, but the ghost of her touch lingered on his skin. It made everything inside him tighten in a way he wasn't prepared for. Every time you get close, he murmured, I feel like I'm losing my grip. She took that in, eyes softening. Maybe you're not losing anything. Maybe you're finding something. He shook his head, but the fight in him was weakening. His voice dropped. You don't know what you're risking. You don't know what you're worth. She countered. Another step. Close enough now that their breaths tangled again, slow and trembling. Either of them moved away. Either of them could. The silence between them thickened, stretching long enough to feel like a confession on its own. Neither moved. Neither blinked. It was as if the air had turned warm and heavy, holding them in a moment neither of them knew how to step out of. She stood inches from him now, close enough that he could hear the uneven rhythm of her breathing. Close enough that her scent, soft, familiar, unsettlingly tender, brushed against him like a memory he never wanted to admit he missed. "Why did you say it like that?" she whispered finally. Her voice wasn't accusing, it was afraid. Hopeful. Bare. He swallowed, eyes tracing the faint tremble in her lips. "Because it's the truth." She took a slow step forward, and the shift of air around them felt like a hand sliding across his chest. He didn't back away this time. Her fingers hovered near his, not touching, just close enough to make the absence of contact burn more than any touch could. "Knowing me," she murmured, eyes locked to his, "does that make you want to stay away? Or closer?" He almost laughed, not from humor, but from the sheer ache of wanting something he wasn't sure he was allowed to want. His voice dropped, rough and barely controlled. "You don't make anything easy. And you never answer the questions that matter," she breathed. Their hands shifted. Not touching, but the space between their fingertips was a breath, a heartbeat, a gravity. He exhaled her name, soft enough to be mistaken for regret. "If I let myself get closer, I won't stop." Her eyes fluttered shut for half a second, the kind of blink that hides 1,000 emotions. "Maybe I don't want you to stop," she said, barely audible. His chest tightened. He wasn't prepared for that. He wasn't prepared for the way her voice trembled with something that sounded a lot like surrender. She looked up at him again, and something inside him cracked, quietly, like ice giving way under sunlight. He reached up, slowly, deliberately, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers grazed her skin, soft, warm, painfully delicate, and she inhaled sharply as if the touch lit something inside her she'd been trying to smother. They froze. His hand lingered. Her head tilted just slightly toward his palm. It felt like a kiss without lips. A promise without words. A breaking point disguised as a breath. And just when he leaned in, not all the way, just enough to taste the moment, she whispered, "Don't look at me like that. I might fall." And he didn't move. Because he already had. The rain came first. A soft, steady hush against the windows, like the night itself was breathing with them. He stood near the edge of the room, shoulders tense, fingertips pressed to the back of a chair as if anchoring himself. She watched him from a few steps away, her pulse fluttering in her throat, her chest rising and falling a little too quickly. Neither spoke at first. The storm outside filled the silence for them, a low, rhythmic whisper that seemed to pull them closer without either of them moving. When she finally walked toward him, it wasn't bold. It wasn't planned. It was instinct, the kind that comes after too many days wanting something you're not supposed to want. He lifted his head at the sound of her footsteps. Their eyes met, and something in him unraveled so quietly it was almost invisible. She stopped right in front of him, close enough that their breaths brushed but didn't blend. "Not yet. You keep looking at me like you're trying not to feel something," she whispered. His lips parted slightly. "I'm not trying," he said. "I'm failing." Her breath caught. The room felt smaller, the air warmer, the space between them shrinking without a single step taken. The rain softened, steady and hypnotic, as if time wanted to witness this instead of rushing past it. Then she reached for his hand. It wasn't a hungry grab or a dramatic gesture. It was gentle, almost shy, 2 fingers grazing the back of his until his hand instinctively turned to meet hers. Their palms touched, and the heat was immediate, dizzying. It traveled up both of their arms like a confession made without words. He stepped toward her, slow, deliberate, as if giving her time to pull away. She didn't. If anything, she leaned closer, her forehead meeting his in a quiet, trembling surrender. Their breaths mingled, warm and unsteady, melting into each other in a way that felt more intimate than any kiss they could have shared. "You scare me," she breathed, her voice barely holding together. Because you make me feel everything I tried so hard to hide. His thumb brushed the side of her wrist, a slow, reverent sweep. You think you're the only one? Another step. Their bodies aligned, their warmth mixing, their chests rising against each other like the night itself had drawn them together. She let her hands slide up to his shoulders, not gripping, just resting, feeling the shape of him beneath her palms. His hands found her waist, tentative at first, then settling with an aching softness. A shiver ran through her, not from cold, but from the weight of everything they'd been holding back. Her breath melted into his. His forehead lowered to the curve of her temple, and her fingers slipped into the fabric of his shirt. Their bodies spoke the words their mouths couldn't. The room swayed with the rhythm of rain, their closeness deepening until it felt like the world outside had disappeared. Nothing explicit. Nothing rushed. Just two people finally letting go, slowly, breath by breath, heartbeat by heartbeat, the night folding around them like an exhale they'd been holding for far too long. The morning didn't break gently. It slipped in quietly, like it was afraid of interrupting whatever fragile thing had been born in the dark. Pale light filtered through the curtains, touching the room with a softness that made everything feel too real, their breaths, their distance, their closeness, the echo of everything unsaid. She woke first. Not with a jolt, but with a slow, searching inhale, as if she was afraid to discover whether the night had actually happened. Whether he was still there. Whether she had imagined the way his arms had held her like the truth he'd been denying. He wasn't touching her now, sleep had pulled him just inches away, but she could still feel the phantom warmth where his skin had rested against hers. It made her chest tighten. Not with regret. Not quite. But with something complicated, something vast and unsteady. She turned slightly, watching the slow rise and fall of his breathing. His face looked calmer than it ever did when he was awake. Younger. Softer. Like the weight he carried in daylight finally loosened its grip on him for a few hours. And that hurt in a way she couldn't explain. Because she didn't know if last night had healed them or broken them further. When he opened his eyes, it was quiet, too quiet. Their gazes met, and for a heartbeat, everything from the night before came rushing back like heat under the skin. His fingers twitched, like they remembered her shape. Hey! He whispered, voice rough from sleep. She tried to answer, but the word caught on something emotional in her throat. He sat up slowly, running a hand through his hair, exhaling like he was bracing himself. We should talk, he said, the sentence everyone hates after a night like theirs. She nodded, even though the thought of unraveling what they'd shared made her stomach twist. But before either of them could speak again, before the truth could settle or shatter, a sudden knock echoed through the apartment. Sharp. Unexpected. Too early for anyone with good intentions. They both froze. His eyes darkened with something she recognized instantly, fear, or guilt, or the realization that the world outside this room still existed. Are you expecting someone? She whispered. He shook his head slowly. No. And just like that, the new day, the one that might have started with peace, turned into something else entirely. Something that could change everything. The morning didn't break all at once. It crept in slowly, soft, pale light slipping through the curtains like it was too shy to witness what the night had left behind. For a moment, either of them moved. The air felt different now, as if the room itself was holding its breath, unsure of what came next. She lay on her side, eyes half open, watching the quiet rise and fall of his chest. His breathing was steady, peaceful, almost warm enough to drown out the whirlwind inside her. Was this love? Or something she'd stepped into because she was afraid of losing him? The questions pressed at her ribs, but her body refused to distance itself from the truth of how he'd held her, carefully, like she was something he finally allowed himself to want. He stirred first, not with a start but a slow, aware shift. His eyes opened, finding her instantly, as if he'd been waiting for her gaze before waking fully. The moment their eyes met, something tightened between them, not last night's heat, but something deeper, heavier. Hey! She whispered, voice fragile. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he lifted a hand, brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek with a tenderness that almost hurt. The gesture made everything inside her ache with the memory of how close they had been, how fear had melted into want, and want into something that felt dangerously like belonging. But then reality returned like a cold gust slipping under a door. He shifted onto his back, staring at the ceiling. "We can't pretend nothing happened," he murmured. Her stomach tightened. "I'm not pretending. That's the problem," he said softly. "Because I don't know what this means, and I'm afraid you do." She sat up, pulling the sheet around herself, not to hide, but to breathe. The silence between them grew dense, filled with unspoken hesitations. She wanted to tell him that last night wasn't a mistake. That it wasn't confusion or loneliness or timing. That it was him. It had always been him. But just as she opened her mouth, the doorbell rang. They froze. He shot her a questioning look. She shook her head, equally lost. The second chime was louder, urgent. A shadow moved beneath the door's frosted glass panel, someone standing there, waiting. Her heartbeat stumbled. His jaw tensed. "Are you expecting someone?" he asked. "No," she whispered. And suddenly the morning wasn't quiet anymore. It was the beginning of something neither of them were ready for. Morning had softened into afternoon by the time they finally faced each other. Their breaths felt steadier now, but the air still carried traces of the night, its warmth, its trembling honesty, its quiet confession spoken through touch instead of words. She sat at the edge of the couch, knees drawn close, sunlight catching the faint worry in her eyes. He stood near the window, hands resting on the glass as though grounding himself. Neither knew what to say first. Words felt too sharp after a night built on softness. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered, not looking at him. He turned, watching her as if trying to memorize the way she held herself, brave and terrified at once. "Maybe not," he said softly. "But I'm not sorry it did." Her eyes lifted, and something in her chest loosened. She wasn't used to being looked at like that, with clarity instead of hope, with truth instead of longing. He wasn't hiding. And she realized that was what scared her. He saw her now. All of her. She swallowed. "Last night, it felt like losing control." He stepped closer, slow enough to give her space. "It felt like choosing you." The room went quiet again, but it wasn't tense. It was tender, like the moment just before a heartbeat steadies. She reached out timidly, fingertips brushing his wrist. He didn't move except to let his hand turn, gently weaving his fingers with hers. "Do you hate me now?" she asked again, softer this time, as if echoing the girl she had been at the start of this entire story. He shook his head, a sad, warm smile shaping his mouth. "No. I just know you now. And knowing you, it makes everything harder and easier at the same time." She leaned forward until her forehead rested lightly against his chest. His arms wrapped around her with the quiet certainty of someone who'd finally stopped running from himself. The world outside felt distant, like rain behind closed windows, while the present moment glowed gently between them. Maybe they weren't promising forever. Maybe they weren't mending everything. But they were choosing to stay, at least for right now, in this fragile peace they built from mistakes and desire and truth. He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. She breathed him in like warmth returning. And the story closed on that, two hearts finally steady enough to listen.